In 2005, enough people shifted support to the hardliners to put Ahmadinejad in office. A former mayor of Tehran, he had a reputation for being incorruptible and was the first non-cleric to win. He campaigned as a man of the people who promised economic prosperity for the poor masses. His main opponent, Rafsanjani, was a wealthy moderate cleric, and the reformers didn't dare run in elections that year. Many reformers even became anti-US. The US further helped the hardliners by getting the population to rally behind them on the nuclear energy program for peaceful civilian use, an inalienable right guaranteed to them by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT.
The Non-Proliferation Treaty is a treaty that was signed in the late 1960s, and its aim was to curb what we call the horizontal proliferation of nuclear weapons. In other words, countries that heretofore had not had nuclear weapons power status would not themselves develop nuclear weapons. It was a bargain between the nuclear powers at the time, France, England, the United States, Russia, and China, and what we call the nuclear have-nots, that in return for them having the ability to develop civilian nuclear power, they would not use that technology and know-how to develop nuclear weapons. The nuclear weapon states themselves were pledged under Article 6 of the treaty to themselves undertake vigorous programs towards disarming their nuclear arsenal. Those nuclear weapon states have failed in their part of the bargain, and they've held on to their arsenal, setting a very terrible example for the rest of the world. For example, with the United States, while we're admonishing Iran to make their processes open, to not become a nuclear weapons power, that right now our government is proposing that we rev up the Department of Energy facilities to develop a new arsenal of nuclear warheads, which are called the Reliable Replacement Warheads. This project, which is projected to cost in the hundreds of millions of dollars, represents new nuclear weapons, and it's a shame that our government is actually taking the lead in starting a new nuclear arms race. It is actually our government with the largest nuclear arsenal that should be taking the lead in disarmament and to set by example the path that other countries should take.
Violated its NPT obligations, continuing to develop new weapons, including those intended for use against Iran. Also, the US gives a pass to its allies, Israel, India, and Pakistan. None of them are signatories to the NPT, and yet the US supports development of their nuclear weapons program. Given Iran's vast oil reserves, many question the need for them to pursue peaceful nuclear energy, but there are valid reasons, as the US must have recognized when Iran was an ally under the Shah, and the US pushed for Iran's nuclear development program, correctly arguing that oil will eventually run out. It is more profitable to export the oil, especially in the future when the price goes up. Also, even though Iran has plenty of crude oil, it lacks refineries. Sanctions has meant no major investment in the oil and gas sector, and the country still hasn't been able to recover enough to keep up with demand from the destruction of refinery capacity during the Iran-Iraq War. With its huge population growth and expanding industrialization, Iran actually relies on imports for refined oil. Then there is the matter of national prestige and pride. As a country that is a regional power, it will not give up its inalienable right under the NPT to have a nuclear program for peaceful use. How would Americans feel if our right to nuclear energy and research was taken away?
We live in a world where there are a lot of pressures to compete in what I would consider the world capitalist system, pressures that in terms of the Iranian leadership and trying to jockey for world position that they look for. And part of this is what has unfortunately been the path, in my view, that other countries have taken as well, is to look for being able to potentially have status in the world and to develop a nuclear program. I don't know if that's where the Iranians are headed, but the potential is there.
Lastly, Iran likely wants the option to be able to build a nuclear deterrent on short notice if needed, just like Japan and dozens of other countries. Iran placed its confidence in the UN and international community to protect it at the start of the Iran-Iraq War, when Saddam Hussein crossed the border and invaded it. But the UN stood by and did nothing, even when it became clear Hussein was using chemical weapons against the Iranian resistance. Iran understands that it must be able to protect itself.
I look at the rest of the region, and I look at whether they wanted to have a nuclear weapon, which, as I understand it, they're not actually developing a nuclear weapon right now. But if they did, even though I'm against nuclear weapons, all nuclear weapons, I can understand the logic of deterrence. I see India, I see Pakistan, I see Israel, I see they're at odds with their neighbor and nearby neighbor Saudi Arabia. And then I look at North Korea barely having a bomb and delivery systems and the United States not going at war with them. It looks like, from Iran's perspective, in my mind, that they would think that they should have a nuclear weapon. And yet, polls there show that they want to have the right to it, as any other country would have a right to nuclear energy. But it's not clear that they're developing nuclear weapons, though I would understand why they would if they were.
While holding the option to develop nuclear weapons if needed, there are good reasons why Iran would hope not to have to exercise that option. The last thing it wants to do is alienate neighboring Arab countries, who might align with the US if they feel threatened by knowing Iran has nuclear weapons. It would strengthen the US position and undermine Iran's regional influence. The Iranian government may not be lying when it says it has no intent to build weapons, as it has said consistently throughout the US campaign to portray this official enemy as an unreasonable, unrelenting threat to the world. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has declared repeatedly that Iran will not attack or threaten any country. He has also issued a fatwa against production, stockpiling, and use of nuclear weapons, and banned nuclear weapons as sacrilegious. Iran has been a consistent supporter of the NPT and called for a nuclear weapons-free Middle East. Under US pressure, the UN Security Council ordered Iran to stop enriching uranium and has imposed sanctions without justification. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, is in charge of monitoring the nuclear programs of all countries. The IAEA is supposed to work with countries to resolve issues and report them to the UN Security Council if they cannot be assured that a country has not diverted nuclear material for non-peaceful use. If that happens, the Security Council can then decide to impose sanctions or use force. In the case of Iran, there is no evidence that Iran is building or even intends to build nuclear weapons. The IAEA director, Dr. El Baradei, has consistently confirmed that there has been no diversion of safeguarded nuclear materials in Iran.
I have been concerned by hearing a lot of talks about use of force. I think that's, in my view, very counterproductive. What we have seen on the ground in Iran that are issues that need to be clarified. I said again, Iran needs to build confidence through suspending its enrichment-related activities. But that has been said. I have repeated that we have not seen any undeclared facilities operating in Iran. We have seen any concrete evidence that the Iran program is being weaponized. We have not received any information to that effect. So I haven't heard any other information to the contrary. So while we're still concerned about the nature of the Iranian program, we should not, I do not believe at this stage that we are facing clear and present danger that require that we go beyond diplomacy.
He has also repeatedly urged skeptics in Western capitals to help the IAEA by sharing any possible proof in their possession of suspicious nuclear activity in Iran. But the only proof offered has been proven false. The U.S. instead relies on coercion to get the UN and international agencies to serve the U.S. agenda.